It's the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre. So glad you could join us. Ohio, once a political bellwether, has become a solidly red state, but Democrats hope to splash in some blue with the likely Democratic nominee for governor, Dr. Amy Acton, who rose to prominence as Ohio health director during the COVID pandemic. This week, she chose former Ohio Democratic Party Chairman David Pepper as her running mate. The likely Republican candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy, the Trump-aligned entrepreneur, this week chose Ohio Senate President Rob McCauley as his running mate. And they're off. The flu is bad enough. Now we have a super flu. Hospitalizations locally are double what they were last week and up all across Ohio. Measles is out there too. 3 unvaccinated kids in Cuyahoga County family have it. Federal funding was frozen for childcare across the country in response to fraud allegations in Minnesota. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine says the money should flow to Ohio because it has safeguards against such chicanery. And Akron police have a policy that officers can use their personal long guns at work. The mayor wants to put an end to that, requiring only department-issued weapons be used. And joining me to discuss those stories and other news from the first week of the year from IdeaStream Public Media, we have reporters Connor Morris and Anna Huntsman. Good to see both of you.
Greetings.
Greetings, Steve. Greetings.
Good morning.
Very good, Connor. It was maybe the most Connor greeting I've ever heard in my entire life. And from the State House News Bureau in Columbus, a woman whose weapon of choice is a company-issued shotgun microphone, Karen Kassler. Hey, Karen.
Happy 2026.
Happy 2026 to you. Yeah, it's the first time we're getting together.
Yeah.
Since last week was actually 2026, but on tape.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we want you to share your thoughts. Ask any questions by emailing us during the show at soi@ideastream.org. And let's get ready to roundtable. It's a midterm election year, and the Ohio governor's seat is up for grabs as there is no incumbent. The presumptive nominees for the 2 major parties finalized their tickets this week. Republican Vivek Ramaswamy, the businessman and former presidential candidate and Department of Government efficiency partner, selected Senate President Rob McCauley of Northwest Ohio as his running mate. Dr. Amy Acton chose the former leader of the Ohio Democratic Party and an active fly in the Republican ointment on social media, David Pepper. Get ready for the Dr. Pepper campaign. All right, I've heard that a couple of other places. Karen?
Yes.
Are you ready for the...
They even brought that out.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
I can see the campaign signs now. So here's a question. In general, do running mates matter? And is it a little different in this case because neither of these 2 candidates has ever held political office?
I think that's the significant thing here is that Vivek Ramaswamy and Amy Acton, like you just said, have never been elected to public office before. David Pepper has run twice statewide and lost both times, but he headed the Ohio Democratic Party for almost 6 years. So he has extensive political experience in that regard. And of course, Senate President Rob McCauley is in the Senate, he was in the House, so he has legislative experience as well. So I think in that respect, it does matter. But I was trying to think of the last time that really a lieutenant governor was somebody that people knew, that they recognized the name. I mean, John Huston's probably the last one because he and DeWine were actually competitors in 2017. They were both running for governor, and then they teamed up to run as a unified ticket. And then you'd probably have to go back to George Voinovich and Mike DeWine teaming up to run before you would really get to candidates on the lieutenant governor running mate side that really kind of moved the needle or made people think twice potentially because they actually knew these names. I mean, David Pepper does have a social media presence, and a lot of people have heard of him. But I've found out over the years that I've been covering the State House, a lot of people don't know anything about state government. So the Senate president may not be that significant a person to folks who are looking at the people who are running with the main candidates.
Well, Ramaswamy runs as a maverick. I'm not a politician. I'm going to come in and clean up government. And yet he then picked somebody who is really very well ensconced in government. But one of the things he said is, if we're going to get anything done, the legislature has to be on the same page as the governor. And so that's why I picked him.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'd wanted to ask Ramaswamy if we got a chance to talk to him after the event at Windows on the River on Wednesday night, but he did not meet with reporters after that. He just got up on stage and he did say that all those things that you just said, he's not planning on being a governor like other governors in a sense. He's got all these ideas, but he needs a legislative partner to get those through. And that's why he says he looked at Rob McCauley as somebody who has the legislative experience, who can get his agenda accomplished, and who, frankly, has another year here, who could potentially smooth the way, in a sense, for Ramaswamy. I asked Macaulay about that on our TV show, The State of Ohio, with our year-end interview last year, about, are you going to be, as a legislature, going to be doing anything that kind of helps Ramaswamy, since so many Republicans have endorsed Ramaswamy? And he said, we look at ideas coming from everywhere, and if Ramaswamy has good ideas, we'll be looking at them.
Now, on the Democratic side, Amy Acton picks David Pepper for a couple of reasons. One, he's an experienced fundraiser with national contacts. But secondly, he's going to be a pit bull.
Yeah, and you're already seeing that. And I think Acton kind of needs that balance there, because she really is more soft-spoken. She talks a lot about listening and helping people and public service and things like that, where David Pepper, we've seen on social media, and even when he was in charge of the Democratic Party, is not afraid to be critical of Republicans in office. And we've seen him really do that. He does these whiteboard videos on social media where he analyzes things like gerrymandering and things like that. Now, the Democratic ticket has talked about a couple of different messages that they're going to try to put out there. While Republicans are talking about cutting income taxes, cutting property taxes, Democrats are talking about things like affordability, but also things like corruption in the state house, which frankly has not been a winning strategy for Democrats over the last 10 or 15 years. So I think Pepper's talked a lot about that, but whether voters will really respond to that is a question.
And when you think about David Pepper, he's run for statewide office himself and lost, and resigned in 2020 as the party chair after a pretty disastrous showing by the Democrats then. So you wonder if that's baggage.
Well, I mean, the Democrats have not had a good 30 years in Ohio. I mean,
I don't know,
let's
10
be
or 30
honest.
years.
I mean, one of the first questions I ask Amy Acton is the idea of, you're coming into a state where Republicans have dominated politics for so many years. They're going to dominate the legislature most likely, even if Acton wins. Why do you want this job? And so that's a question that I think, obviously David Pepper and Amy Acton do have an answer to, because they feel that Republican policies have been a problem. And that's one of the things that I think is interesting when you hear Ramaswamy talk about some of the things he wants to do, and that he's been dissatisfied with job creation and educational standards and things like that in Ohio. Republicans have been in charge for 30 years or so. And so he's almost kind of running against what Republicans, including Governor Mike DeWine, have been doing. And now DeWine did endorse the Ramaswamy-Macaulay ticket right after Macaulay was announced as the running mate. And I think he did that because he likes Macaulay's legislative presence. He thinks that what Macaulay has done in the legislature has been a solid move. And rather than going kind of out of the box and picking somebody not grounded in government, Ramaswamy did.
Well, what DeWine also says, he thinks that Ramaswamy will be better for business, even though others have pointed out that Ramaswamy has a business, that the CEO moved from Ohio to Texas. So maybe his point is it would be better in Ohio if he was the governor and policies were better.
And that's been an interesting story there. Ramaswamy addressed that in his speech on Wednesday before he introduced Macaulay, saying that basically the head of his business told him he was going to have to move the business to Texas because of tax policy here in Ohio, which, you could make the argument of, well, if Ramaswamy really believed in Ohio, wouldn't he keep his business here? But he has said that that's been a problem, and he wants to change that. Now, the question is, how do you cut property taxes and cut income taxes and still increase educational standards and pay teachers more and have more police presence and things like that Republicans say they want to do both those things, and that's pretty hard to do.
Robert sends us an email. He says, I'd like to say that it must be painful for Amy Acton that her former boss did not endorse her for governor. I think she did an amazing job guiding Ohio through the pandemic, and yet her former boss, the man she shared the stage with for days during the pandemic, actually weeks, snubbed her. What are the thoughts about that?
Well, I think it is an interesting position that DeWine was in, because we asked him last month when he met with reporters at a Christmas time breakfast. My colleague Sarah Donaldson actually asked him, why haven't you endorsed Ramaswamy? He had talked about he expected to endorse the Republican candidate, but had never said he was going to endorse Vivek Ramaswamy, and he finally did that this week. And I think that Acton's presence there might have been part of that, because, he did pick her as his Department of Health director. They did implement COVID policies that Acton is now getting a lot of heat for, but DeWine has said were ultimately his responsibility. The buck stopped with him. And so I think that it was an interesting position that DeWine was in. It's part of the reason I think DeWine took some time in deciding when he was going to come out and endorse Ramaswamy. I think he always was going to, but when was he going to do it?
There's a primary challenger for Ramaswamy, Casey Pooch. Is that how you pronounce it? Putch.
Yes.
Running to the right of Ramaswamy. Likely not to have any impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? And DeWine had two challengers when he ran in 2022, so I'm not surprised to see somebody come out there. Putch has really been pushing the whole abolish property taxes idea, because Ramaswamy at first had talked about abolishing property taxes, but then pulled back on that. And I mean, I would imagine that having Rob McCauley on the ticket would make it very difficult for Ramaswamy to be in favor of abolishing property taxes, because if that movement does go forward, you're going to see people like Rob McCauley and Speaker Matt Huffman and Governor Mike DeWine really coming out saying we cannot abolish property taxes. We have to do property tax reform. So I think Putch is out there saying we need to get rid of property taxes entirely. He'll get some traction on that. But Ramaswamy has a lot of money and has done a lot of work already to really establish himself. And so I think the primary will be interesting to watch, but yeah.
10 million in the last reporting period, 20 million so far that he's raised.
That's what he's raised.
Right,
we don't
raised.
know. We don't know what he's spent yet so far, and that's the thing to I think watch here is what he's actually spent, and that of course doesn't even include his own contributions, doesn't include super PAC, doesn't include outside money like that. And Acton, we're still waiting to see hers, which come at the end of the month. They both are filing on January 31st, or at least that's when the reports due, and there'll be something to look at.
All right. Are there other candidates, other parties that are likely to be on the ballot?
I mean, you know, there's always, not on the primary. I don't think Acton has a primary opponent. I think the Democrats really, especially once Tim Ryan got out of the possibility of running, Democrats really came up and solidified behind the Acton now Pepper ticket.
All right, Pat sent us an email, and yes, we are aware of this, Pat. She said, you've presumably read about Ramaswamy's family bodyguard selling drugs. And Anna, late Thursday was reported, a bodyguard with a security firm for the family had been arrested on drug trafficking charges. When I read that story, it was, you know, he's making a bag drop and on his porch and allegedly.
Federal agents found there are several packages mailed to his home in Bellefontaine, Ohio, hundreds containing counterfeit OxyContin pills, meth, many laced with fentanyl. So that's where that comes from.
And it was a private security firm that hired this person. They said they immediately removed him from the details. So it wasn't as if he's a 23-year-old guy, but it wasn't as if he was Ramaswamy's longtime bodyguard.
Right.
And they were,
it was just part of the security team for his family.
But yeah, obviously not good news when that's happening during your campaign.
Yeah.
Real quickly, Karen, the other big race being watched in Ohio is the Senate matchup between Sherrod Brown, who's trying to re-enter the Senate, and John Husted, who we talked about before. Frank LaRose endorsed Husted yesterday. He got the coveted LaRose endorsement.
You're going to see a lot of endorsements from people that, unless you watch politics really carefully, you might not know who they are. Robert Sprague, the treasurer, is endorsing people. You know, Keith Faber, the auditor. But all these people are also running, too. I mean, Frank LaRose, Keith Faber, and Robert Sprague, who are currently in office, are running for other offices. So, you know, endorsing somebody does put their name back out there as well. We've got interviews with Sherrod Brown and John Husted on our TV show, The State of Ohio, this weekend, talking a little bit about health care and immigration, things like that. Those interviews were done before the action in Venezuela and before what happened with ICE in Minnesota. So you're not going to hear anything about those things. But still, these issues of immigration, health care, and just why they're running, why they want to be in the Senate are important, I think, to hear.
Excellent. Looking forward to those programs. State and local health experts urge us to get a flu shot, even though the shot doesn't seem to be matched up well with the current strain of the virus. Flu cases are on the rise statewide, and in Northeast Ohio, flu-related hospitalizations doubled this week, according to an IdeaStream report. Year-over-year cases are higher as well, and we're still several weeks away from peak flu season. We've got measles to worry about, too. 3 kids in Cuyahoga County and a family there have it. And I've heard this year's flu referred to as a super flu. What does that mean?
Yeah, doesn't that sound like fun and exciting? Super flu, but it's not. I don't know about you, but I feel like there's so many people that I know that are sick. It just seems like everybody came out of the holidays sick, either with this super flu or a cold or something like that. So it's kind of brutal out there right now. Across the state, we have almost 2,000 hospitalizations from this flu currently this week. And what it is, it's a different strain of the flu than we are used to in Ohio. That's what Ohio health officials said this week. It's influenza A, so we don't have a lot of immunity with it. So that's why it seems to be kind of affecting so many more people than we saw last year, at least in the flu season, although it was a high flu year last year as well. But it's this super flu, meaning it's just infecting much more people because we don't have a ton of immunity for it.
And Dr. Dr. Bruce Vanderhoff,
Yeah.
we call him Dr. Bowtie,
Yeah.
said this week, as the health director for the state of Ohio, that the shot itself is not going to necessarily protect you, but it could mitigate the depth of the virus.
Right.
You wouldn't be as sick.
Right. They're encouraging people to still get the flu shot if you haven't yet, because as you mentioned, it seems to make less severe cases. So you're less likely to end up in the hospital, less likely to have a really bad case if you are vaccinated. The other problem is, though, and we had heard this for some time now, that the shot this year is not a great match for the strains of flu that we're seeing. So that's another problem there. But people are still saying, officials are still encouraging you to get the shot if you haven't yet.
Okay. And then measles, as we mentioned, that's starting to ramp up as well. We had a bad year last year, a bad year 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and now there's some concern because of this family in Cuyahoga County that's showing early signs.
It appears that it's just contained to this Cuyahoga County family, the three kids, although there is a fourth kid in the family who apparently is starting to exhibit symptoms as well. And they're unvaccinated, and they recently traveled to a place that's having a measles outbreak. So that's what we know so far about that. So that's another concern this season.
Okay. And moving on, hundreds of protesters gathered in downtown Cleveland last night outside the Anthony J. Celebrezzi Federal Building. Renee Good, a mother of 3, died after she was shot behind the wheel of her car. Federal officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance, were quick to characterize her as a radical who was trying to run over the ICE agent there. She was shot by an ICE agent. Others who saw the disturbing video of the shooting, widely distributed on social media, contend she was turning and appeared to be trying to drive away when she was shot. A lot of debate about that. I'm seeing frame-by-frame analyses, Connor. Let's talk about, though, in Cleveland, many miles away, that very day, protest is mobilized. What was the message that they were delivering last night in Northeast Ohio?
Yeah, we saw protests across the region, across the country, just a lot of outrage being expressed by folks. Looking at the various coverage, folks are calling ICE agents stormtroopers. There's references to Nazi Germany, calling them agents of a fascist state. Generally, folks are saying the killing of Good was unjustified. There was also, sadness. There have been moments of silence for Good as well. There have been some statements made about that she was a legal observer. Somebody at the protest last night in Cleveland said she took it upon herself to advocate, to be a witness, to be sure that laws were properly enforced. That they were saying that's why she was there initially in the first place. So a lot of anger and sadness and outrage, and people saying that this is an extension of something that they see as unethical use of law enforcement on the part of the Trump administration.
She's a mother of 3. She was there, obviously, protesting ICE and what they were doing in the neighborhood in Minneapolis. But we have this debate now about, what was she doing? Was she trying to run the police officer over, or the ICE officer? Could he have taken other measures? It appears one of the shots was fired as he's beside the car. Anna, when we look at that, give us a sense of essentially just what happened there.
Sure, and I will say too, as someone who covers police reform a lot in Akron, so I've heard a lot about this. A lot of what I hear is the job of a law enforcement officer is to minimize harm and save life. And there's a lot of conversation about, when you're trained for this, you're trained to not put yourself in harm's way. So there's part of the conversation is, again, that frame by frame that you mentioned. Some people are saying that the agent put himself in front of the car. So what you can see in the video is, she's in her car. It appears that she might be waving. They're on a street and there's a protest going on and ICE agents are coming through in their cars, and she appears to wave on one of the cars, the ICE agent cars, and that drives
which
away.
passes her, yeah.
Which passes. Then the other one drives up, appearing to also pass. Instead, it stops, and the agents come out of the car and go directly to her window and start it looks like they're yelling at her. It almost kind of looks like they're reaching into the car. And so then you see the car kind of like back up and then start to maybe drive away. And that's when, it all kind of happens. So again, there is this frame by frame conversation of, was his leg in front when she was driving away? I always say more to come, but that's what we know now.
Very disturbing
Yeah.
video. And what's interesting here, too, is that you usually don't have right away anyone from the federal government or anyone in any position of authority give an opinion immediately. Usually we don't know the facts of this. We don't know whether she was being told to stop or to pull away. And maybe they let that play out. In this case, we had the vice president calling her a radical. We had the Kristi Noem, the Homeland Secretary, talking about that she weaponized the car. It was
Called her a domestic terrorist.
exactly. So that's that end of it. And then we hear too that an investigation of this shooting, which the state would like to conduct in Minnesota,
Right.
cannot because the federal government has taken it over and
Yeah.
they're not going to share evidence there. So the
Right.
very agency that's investigating it is part of the groups of people that are saying nothing was done
Right.
incorrectly. I mean, the question is, in my case, I'm not saying something was right or wrong, or maybe no one else's, but there's an investigation that has to happen.
Right, and as you mentioned, the federal government is taking that over, and as you mentioned, it immediately became divisive with the federal government, officials saying one thing, but then you have the local officials, the mayor of Minneapolis, telling ICE to get out of the state.
Yeah, with an F word in there.
Yeah, I'm trying to be clean here. And then you just see all the, Minnesotan officials totally on, good side and saying that this, that she was trying to drive away and all that. So it's been an interesting few days hearing about this unfolding.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Anna. Appreciate that analysis. And we're going to take a quick break right now. And when we return, we're going to talk about how the East Cleveland School District has emerged from state oversight and how viral videos alleging daycare fraud have now spread to Ohio. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre with Connor Morris and Anna Huntsman from IdeaStream, and State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler joins us from Columbus. And before we get back to the roundtable, I want to encourage you to try our IdeaStream News Quiz. It publishes every Friday. Test your knowledge on the local and state stories produced by IdeaStream, the State House News Bureau, and the Ohio Newsroom. Love to have you give that a try and compare scores. You can find the quiz at ideastream.org/quiz. All right, the East Cleveland City School District is riding high after being released last month from state oversight, which had been in place for more than 7 years. Connor, this happened over the break, and we weren't live over the break, or we would have talked about it at that point. But let's talk about what prompted the state to release the district from academic oversight.
Yeah, so this has been somewhat of a long time coming, about 7 years since the state appointed the CEO and superintendent, Dr. Henry Pettigrew. He's appointed by the Academic Distress Commission 7 years ago, and the district has improved on a lot of measures since: test scores, college and career readiness. More kids are earning industry credentials in areas like manufacturing, healthcare, cybersecurity. They've even introduced, interestingly enough, a little nugget of news. They've introduced the Film Academy recently for students. So they're doing some good things over there, it seems, from at least according to the state and from the officials there. And then there are these benchmarks that are set when you are placed on academic distress. And if you meet a certain number of them, they met 16 of 20, then eventually you're released. And so now I believe it's just Youngstown schools are the only ones that are under academic distress now. Lorraine Schools was released a couple of years ago, so they were like kind of the big three: East Cleveland, Lorraine, and Youngstown.
So they're celebrating that. I mean, the idea of being under state control is not ideal. So you want to be able to do your own. And so you said 16 of these measures have been met, but they still have challenges.
Of course, any urban school district it faces challenges in this country. You're going to see low test scores. You're going to see high chronic absenteeism. It's not because of it's just because of a certain population of students, but it kind of is also because it's generally these school districts are serving high poverty students who have a lot going on at home. Teachers are really trying to get these students caught up as best as possible. And so, yeah, I mean, even as they've had these improvements, they still have 1 out of 5 stars on early literacy, which is one of the most important measures for getting kids kind of caught up and ready for school. Test scores is still only 2 out of 5 stars, so to speak. So
They got work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same thing with CMSD and Akron and any other urban school district across the.
CMSD being Cleveland
Of
Metropolitan School
course.
District.
Yeah, of course.
And it's not, in this case, it was unusual that Pettigrew was in place the entire time. Often you have distress commissions that are lasting a long time and superintendents, but there was a study by Cleveland State University Center for Urban Education that said that may have had the stability there may have had an impact.
Yeah, this was interesting. There haven't been a ton of studies done on these academic distress commissions, countrywide, but in East Cleveland's case, they found that it was a boon for them to have one leader who was in place the entire time, and also to exit with pretty significant improvements to, generally speaking, these state-appointed commissions are very unpopular. They're seen as taking away local control. And generally speaking, folks say, well, how are you going to improve things if you don't have local control, if you don't have your own school board? Things changed in the state recently where, there is local control now, even if they are under academic distress. And also, interestingly enough, the state changed the way that they approach academic distress commissions again recently. They keep changing the way they do this.
Right.
And now if you have certain 2 out of 5 stars on the state report card for 3 years in a row, which some districts are moving to that point, you could be placed under academic distress again. So we could be looking for that in the future here.
All right. Well, hopefully more progress continues to be made. Governor Mike DeWine spent much of the week refuting what he called disinformation spread on social media alleging fraud in the state's daycare system, the child care system. The online videos specifically target daycares run by Somali immigrants. Ohio has the second largest population of Somalis in the nation. And Karen, this goes back to the situation in Minnesota. In Minnesota, there is a huge fraud investigation. It involves Somali-run child cares. It was led by a social media influencer investigator. And so because of that, the federal government said, we're going to cut funding to all of the funding for childcare in states. And DeWine came out and said, listen, that's not the case here.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to watch this unfold, and it feels like there's echoes to what we saw in Springfield in late 2024 when there were these false and racist rumors about Haitian immigrants who were there legally eating people's pets. Those turned out not to be true. And DeWine and others had said publicly, the mayor of Springfield, others had said, this is not true. And yet those rumors and those false claims still continued to go forward into the presidential campaign. And we're seeing, I think, some of that here now because DeWine has been saying that there is certainly fraud in any government program, that there are people at all levels who are committing fraud. And of course, the state and the federal government are committed to finding those people, but you can't paint an entire community with that broad a brush. And yet we saw Vice President J.D. Vance, who had also talked about the Springfield racist rumors in 2024, saying at the White House briefing that this was happening in Ohio. And, there's no evidence that there's been this widespread fraud like what was happening in Minnesota. And investigations are going on. But you do have these influencers, these alleged journalists who are going door to door at daycares trying to get in, which, daycares are places where kids are. And so naturally, there are privacy concerns, there are security concerns. And so, these daycare operators are not really interested in opening the door for anybody they don't know, much less people who are standing there with cameras and saying some really disturbing things. We've seen some really horribly racist comments coming out on X and social media that are attacking these child care facilities and their operators.
Meanwhile, what's happening in Minnesota ain't nothing. And we've got a number of indictments. There's widespread allegations of fraud, not just now in the child care part of that, but in other social service agencies. This is not to say that, as you mentioned earlier, that fraud doesn't happen or that there isn't a big case going on in Minnesota. The point being, people just want to sort of make the same equation here in Ohio, and the governor is saying, we've got guardrails against that. What are those guardrails?
Well, there are specific things that have been done in terms of paying based on attendance, not enrollment. And that was something that actually came out in the budget that there was a budget correction bill that kind of fixed that because there was apparently a move to try to pay based on enrollment, not attendance. But now it is attendance, not enrollment. So that cuts down on some things. There have been some moves on payments to make sure that payments are going to entities that actually are in operation. There's some guardrails on who can actually bring kids into child care facilities in general. And I mean, anybody who has children in a publicly funded childcare knows that there are rules. And again, there are privacy concerns. There are security measures that are in place to make sure that nothing happens to those kids who are entrusted to the care of the people who operate those facilities. Auditor Keith Faber has said that, the state audits programs, not beneficiaries. And so they're still looking, though, for any sort of verifiable, actionable information that can point them into the direction of fraud, because these entities are created like the auditor's office and that sort of thing, are created to make sure that fraud doesn't happen. But fraud does happen. It happens in publicly funded programs all over the place, but you have to try to find that. You can't just assume it's happening. I mean, in this country, we assume people are innocent until proven guilty.
By the way, to the point we were talking earlier in politics, I just got an email alert that John Husted gets an endorsement from Treasurer Robert Sprague. Again, Republicans endorsing Republicans, Democrats endorsing Democrats, not a big surprise, but just got that note and we mentioned that earlier. Moving to Akron, police there bring their own long guns to work, but Akron's mayor says they should use only department-issued weapons. He inserted that new rule in the capital budget that he had submitted to City Council this week. The issue of personal long guns has become a concern for community members after 15-year-old Jasmine Tucker was shot dead by an officer who was using his own gun in 2024. And Anna, the mayor's proposal replaces the current policy allowing the officers to bring their own gun. Malik says it's just not great for optics, particularly.
Yeah, that's what he said. It kind of is going to streamline the process. There's currently a policy. You can't just show up to work with whatever gun you want. That's
Right.
not the current policy. The policy is you would have to go through some sort of tracking process. I don't know the full policy, but it's been in place for some time, and there are different reasons behind it. Officers have said in the past, it's what they're comfortable with, this particular long gun versus another one. So there are, current parameters in place. But as you mentioned, Malik is saying he understands the perception of what it kind of looks like, especially when you see officers, fatally shooting with their personal long gun. It doesn't always look great to the community. And the community has brought up that concern in the past. So this is in the capital budget. It's in a line item for replacing gear for the police department. And Malik also said this wouldn't be an overnight fix. This is part of developing the policy, is this funding line item.
So there wouldn't be no long guns. Police would still have those guns.
Absolutely,
It's just
yeah.
that they would be in the, issued by the
Right.
department.
That's what Malik was kind of pointing out. Every other piece of equipment, he says, whether it's, a handgun or something like that, it's always department issued.
Yeah, so why is it? Why? I mean, I was
don't know.
surprised to just hear that police officers have their own guns and bring them to work. And I know it's not just showing up with
Yeah.
a different gun every day, but okay, this is my personal
Long gun,
AR-15,
yeah.
and I'm going to bring that to work and get it approved and use it. And I thought to myself, shouldn't they be issued that? They're issued sidearms, they're issued uniforms.
Right, that's what Malik is saying. Every other piece of equipment is department issued, and we are going to look into what is the preferred long gun of the department, and we're going to issue those. Again, that's going to take some time, but that's kind of the intent. And there's also currently a system for tracking who has what guns are qualified, which ones are disqualified, and he said that's kind of an administrative hassle as well. So that's kind of the reasoning behind this.
All right, and you covered the budget, and we're going to be digging into that, I'm sure, more as time goes on.
Yeah.
But a couple of highlights. One of them is the Interbelt beautification, with or without federal money.
Yeah, that's been a topic of conversation because there was so much momentum behind this project. So the Interbelt is a highway that was part of urban renewal in the 1970s, and it cut through a predominantly black neighborhood, lots of black businesses, and it was never finished and then eventually decommissioned. So the city has been trying to rectify that situation by going through all these consultations about what could this area look like. And so all this to say they were ready to go. They have this big project, the Interbelt, master plan, and then they got this $10 million grant from the Department of Transportation last year. And then a few months after that was announced, it was paused as part of the Trump administration's kind of pausing of anything that really has to do with equity. So basically what we saw in this budget is the city is proposing to commit $500,000 to at least do the beautification of the area of that highway and some of the parts of that master plan. We don't know too many details yet because it would have to go through council. But I asked Malik about that. When he was presenting the budget, I said, $10 million is $10 million. So he was like, absolutely, we're going to continue advocating for that. He's taken Ohio senators around, and he says they're not hiding the equity piece, but really mentioning that this could be a big thing for economic development. So that grant, we still don't know, but they're going to move forward with kind of what the city has control of, which is that funding.
All right, we'll cover the other highlights in that budget as time goes on.
A lot of
in City
roads,
Council.
resurfacing.
A lot of resurfacing,
Yep.
and a lot of sewer stuff
A lot
too.
of sewer, yep.
All right, like every city budget. It
Yeah,
seems.
but Akron's got the consent decree, so they spend a lot of money, 58% water and sewer
Wow.
in this budget. Yep.
Okay. Swearing in for Cleveland's smaller-sized city council happened this week, and grumbling about leadership followed not long after. The slimmed down to 15 from 17 council was sworn in. They were slimmed down, by the way, due to population decline. It features 3 new members and 1 returning member who cast a no vote on a perfunctory approval of council's rules, saying leadership does not seek broad input from its members. Connor, literally within the first hour, we see what is not usual because everyone is a member of the same party, essentially.
Yeah.
They're all Democrats. They usually agree at least on the rules of council, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, so I mean, so 2 of the new council members, we have Nikki Hudson and Tanmay Shaw. They were also showing their differences as well, of course, and that mentioned there about the budget approval. Richard Starr, who's
Yeah, it wasn't a
returning-
budget approval. It was
or,
the
I mean,
rules,
excuse
yeah.
me, the rules approval. Councilman Richard Starr, said he voted no on it. One of 15, 1 out of 15, no versus yeses. He cast a lone no vote, and he's just basically said, we need more council input from everyone before we approve these rules. So he's kind of showing this term might be a little bit different for as far as his kind of response to the leadership goes. And then these other new members as well. So Tanmay Shaw and Nikki Hudson. So Hudson, actually interesting that I'd covered her before. She was a part of a protest group for a school plan over in her neighborhood.
The Cadell neighborhood.
Yeah, in the Cadell neighborhood, where basically, they're going to be cutting down. The school district was going to be cutting down a lot of mature trees, and so they protested, and then they got a change from the district and the city to basically say we're gonna protect these trees. And then Shaw opened his speech by saying, "Free, free, free Palestine." Responsive crowd of supporters there, and he took aim at the national and regional lawmakers and financial backers, calling out what he says is a settler colonial project. So that's gonna already setting him apart from other council members.
All
there.
right, going to be an interesting term. And in city council in Canton, it should be interesting as well because because public comments were restored at meetings, but there are new rules for those. So let's talk about that, Anna. It's pretty strict rules, but before the rule was no one could say a thing.
Right. And then before that happened, there were like no rules compared to other city councils across Northeast Ohio and the state. So yeah, they suspended public comment last year after they said they were getting threats on social media and that things were starting to get unruly in council chambers because there were truly no rules. People could speak for as long as they wanted to. That's not even something you see in Akron and Cleveland. So right now they're going to have 3 minutes, only 10 speakers per meeting. You have to sign up ahead of time. These are all, again, pretty standard. The interesting things here are it limits who can speak. So you have to be a Canton resident or own property in the city or be a utility customer or own a business in the city. So let's say I'm not a journalist and I'm a private citizen. My parents live in Canton. If I wanted to go speak on their behalf, I don't qualify for any of those things. So that's where some people are kind of still saying that there needs to be some sort of change here. They're saying it kind of limits who can really speak. And, also there's concerns about folks who are homeless and they don't have an address to share. And that was a lot of the conversation that was happening last year was about protecting the homeless community. So there are still some people who are saying this goes too far.
Did they also say you had to be at least 5'5", wearing a collared shirt and shoes?
Yeah, sorry.
none of those are-
None of those. So yeah, you can't speak either, Mike. Just kidding.
All right, what are you talking about?
just kidding.
I'm wearing a collared shirt.
True.
Canton City Schools are facing a budget deficit. And let's talk a little bit about that. It's $17 million by 2028. In response to the district this week unveiled a plan to trim costs. And Connor, you've been down this road before.
Yeah.
It looks like what's happening in Cleveland and Akron and a number of other places, but they're talking about reducing programs and reducing footprint.
Yeah, exactly. They're already constructing 2 new elementary schools, and they're kind of ramping up that schedule now to get those online, and then they're going to be closing a whole bunch of other schools. And the idea is to really just, we're not going to be operating as many schools, so it's going to not be as expensive. We're not going to renovate these schools eventually, maybe. And then also, there are concerns about staffing. Of course, they're going to have to reduce staff to reduce the budget. Luckily, they say that at least in terms of teaching staff, they're going to do that by attrition. We already have these positions. We're just going to cut them, that the people are not in any longer. Might be some cuts on the administrative side, but we'll have to see there. So,
And part of the issue is a reduction in federal funds, state funds. It's like all schools are dealing with.
yeah, so at the state level, schools generally in this last budget, they saw just very flat funding or reduced funding. Canton was one of them. About $7 million in reduction of federal and state. And so they're saying this is really hitting us hard. I just talked to the teacher union president who said this is the result of the state's funding priorities. They are not prioritizing public education. So,
All right. We're going to take a quick break right now, though, and a few more stories to go, including a new shelter to help homeless people during cold weather in Cleveland. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Mike McIntyre, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Mike McIntyre, along with Karen Kassler, Anna Huntsman, and Connor Morris. A new overnight shelter for homeless people owned by the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless opened in downtown Cleveland this month, providing a stable place with low barriers for entry during the cold winter months. Connor, who is this shelter designed for specifically?
so it's folks that are not in the traditional shelter system. There are, at any given time, there are folks that are out on the street or in parks, in cemeteries, and in tents, or in cars. So this is really meant to get those folks out of the cold during like the harshest weather months in Cleveland. And so this is really meant for them. And they do a check, when they come in, like, hey, are you already in a shelter currently? So they're trying to prioritize those folks as best as possible.
And it's very short term. That's the other part of it. And you and I have covered this, and back when I was with the Plain Dealer, we were covering the Metanoia Project and how they were in a church on Denison Avenue and trying to just provide a place where people could be warm overnight. That's been a problem every year. Now what we're saying, what the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless is saying, is we've got a place where people know where it is. It's always going to be open. It's not someone else's church or facility. That's what's important.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And I've heard a lot of great things about the Metanoia Project as well, really, because
And they're still out on the east side now, too.
exactly. But the issue really was, we're not sure where we can find a space for this. It changes every year. The hours could be different. Sometimes they might not be open necessarily because the church has got their own priorities. They're small, faith-based, they don't have a huge budget, and nor does any of these advocacy groups, of course. But NEOC, they said they fundraised $600,000 or $500,000. I'd have to check on that, but to buy this structure in Cleveland to make it a permanent spot.
And the idea of low barrier to entry means you can have a spouse there with you. You can have children with you. And some of these places are the men have to go one place, the women another, the children perhaps somewhere altogether different.
Exactly. There are rules that these shelters have to abide by. So if you're a couple without kids, you can go there together. If you have a pet, you can go there. So they got space for that. So the idea is, 6 p.m. to 8 a.m., you're safe here. You can come on in. And then after that, you can go about your day and then you can come back the next night.
All right. A Franklin County Common Pleas Court judge has extended a temporary restraining order that prevents Ohio from sending the first payment of unclaimed funds to the Browns' new stadium in Brook Park for that project. The judge's decision keeps the restraining order in place until a decision is made whether to grant an injunction. If that's granted, the funding mechanism would be paused until a legal challenge over using unclaimed funds plays out. And Karen, this whole thing was started, the Dan Law Firm here locally in Northeast Ohio filed suit and said, listen, the state's plan to take money out of unclaimed funds to give to other stadium projects too, but first this Browns project, it's not constitutional.
Yeah, that's what they've been claiming all along, that this is money that the state was holding for its rightful owners and not money that the state can just do what it wants to with. We're talking about between $1.7 and $1.9 billion that was supposed to be transferred over to this fund, that $600 million of it would be used for the Brown Stadium project, but the rest could be used for other stadium projects. You've got two dueling cases here. We've got a state case, which is the one that the judge ruled on yesterday, basically extending a temporary restraining order, stopping the transfer of that money. But there's also a federal case that has moving forward as well. And so what right now is happening is that the money is not being transferred, but we're still waiting to see what happens with both of these judges doing some final rulings to decide whether the money will be transferred. And so this is an ongoing situation.
And the money was supposed to come out on January 1st. There was
Yeah.
a delay. Now it was supposed to end January 8th. Now it's been extended until a decision is made on the injunction. But if there is an injunction granted on this thing too, that would really muck up the plans because the Browns really want to get moving in order to move into that new stadium when their lease expires in Cleveland.
Yeah, that's going to be the question is if neither judge, and the temporary restraining order yesterday was extended so that that judge in Franklin County Court could look at everything and decide. If both judges say no, the transfer can't happen, then what happens at the state level? How does the state backfill that $600 million that they did say that they were going to be providing to the Browns? And of course, there's other stadiums that also want money too. And so this is a really interesting case to follow. And again, it's happening at the state level and the federal level. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
All right. In regards to the team, the Browns, once again, the most interesting news is the stuff that happens when they aren't in the season. And the Browns have fired their head coach, Kevin Stefanski. They fired him on Black Monday. The Browns are one of 8 teams now that have canned their coaches. He led the team for 6 seasons, won the NFL's Coach of the Year award twice, but he won 8 games in the last 2 seasons. Anna, that's not going to cut it.
No, I don't. It's not. Yeah, and
I think many
No.
folks in Northeast Ohio would agree. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, listen, it all comes down to that. Your job is to win games. If you
Yeah.
won 8, you can blame this or blame that. But I think he realizes that as well. But Karen, the intrigue now too is that we've got John Harbaugh, who is this really well-respected coach that was fired from Baltimore. Who knows? Maybe he comes to Cleveland because he wants to stick it to them, one of our rivals, formerly our team. And then you have all of these other openings. It's like a whole new season. Who's going to be the coach of what?
Yeah, exactly. It's a whole new market here. My colleague Sarah Donaldson is a Steelers fan, and she's talking about she's talking about going to the playoff game, and I'm like, oh wait, they play football after the second week of January? I forgot about that. But yeah, I think that watching what's going to happen here and kind of figuring out exactly who the Browns settle on. Everybody's got their favorites, I think, but this is going to be something to watch. And you've got other teams that are also competing for some really good coaches out there.
It's funny that you should mention Pittsburgh because it was the game against Pittsburgh that Baltimore lost that got Pittsburgh into the playoffs. If had Baltimore won, it would have gotten into the playoffs. And I saw this meme where it was the field goal that was kicked and missed by Baltimore. In the middle of it, in the thing, it said, if this is made, then the coach of the Steelers is fired. If it goes outside of either one of the uprights, the coach of the Ravens is fired. And he was. It was a missed
Yeah.
field goal.
Yeah. And Sarah reminded me that the Browns have never won the division, and that's just really
What?
painful. But
No,
it's
that's not true.
Well, I mean, I think I
In
think
history, the Browns
in
have
the
never-
division that we're in.
Oh, in the
you
current
know,
division.
Yeah, the current
they have-
division. I don't think we've ever won it. So, but I think the frustration here has just been going back. We're talking about multiple coaches, multiple quarterbacks, multiple iterations of this team. When are we going to get a team that wins? Because it's almost statistically impossible for us to be as bad as we are, and yet here we are. And we had, like you said, the reigning coach of the year for 2 different seasons here, and we fired him. What's going on at the organization that we can't achieve?
It's a good thing for you, Karen, that you're an Ohio State football fan and a Cleveland baseball fan, and you don't have to worry about this kind of nonsense.
It's baseball season now and Cavs
Yeah.
season. Let's just go.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
yeah,
very.
but what's going on with the Cavs, though?
All right,
Well,
let's
and at
not
least
even-
we have Miles Garrett. I want to say, Miles Garrett
yeah.
is awesome, and
Part owner of the
really.
Cavs.
We're really lucky to have him. And, there are some really great people on the Browns. It would be great to see that team achieve what we all want them to achieve.
You know what I'd love to do someday is follow the Browns in the playoffs in an RV. And you can do that because the IX Center is your destination this weekend. The Ohio RV Super Show runs through Sunday. It's the last year for the event at the IX Center. Under a deal signed last year, 1 million square feet will be leased in the building for a data center, of course. And so we won't see the RV show, but this is like a Cleveland tradition. Boat show is coming up too.
Cat Fanciers Association show.
Bridal show. also
Isn't
coming
there a Dungeons and Dragons thing?
I'm sure there
something?
is. There's a gaming classic, yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I've gone a couple of times, but you go to this thing and you see these houses on wheels that you could never afford, but it's kind of a cool experience.
Oh,
That's an RV. Is that what you say every time you go?
That's exactly what I say. That's one humdinger of an RV. That's what I say. Karen, I'm going to grab the RV and come on down and visit you in Columbus sometime soon. Good to talk with you.
You're welcome anytime. Happy 2026. Let's go.
All right. Happy 2026 to you as well. And that's going to wrap our show for today. My thanks to you, Anna Huntsman. Good to have you with us. And also to you, Connor Morris.